Hello and welcome to the next reading, the penultimate reading from the Filmgoer's Guide to God by Tim Cawkwell. I had a feeling I could have done both chapters, and the epilogue, but I'm thinking we'll do one reading this week and the last reading, God willing, next week. So today's subject is heaven, and there are 3 films where the author has named: The Colour of Pomegranates, Francis, God's Jester, and The Miracle. So page 125 in this book, and it opens with a verse from Psalm 142, I'm not sure which one. Bring my soul out of prison, that I may give thanks unto thy name. The righteous shall compass me about. If we seek heaven on earth, we are not going to find it readily in the films the author, have discussed in this book. Certainly not in the daily life of remote Danish or Scottish communities, not among Bresson's heroes and heroines struggling against earthly discomfort, not in Tarkovsky's epic dissection of the sufferings of the Russian people in Andrei Rublev, not in the hardships of life in the American South, not in the imploding mafia family in The Funeral, not in the Los Angeles of Schrader's American Gigolo, not in wartime, not at the bedside of a dying person, not on the road to martyrdom. These universes are laden with a sense of sin and earthly pain, more a reflection of what hell might be like than heaven. Hence why he's probably not covered hell. He's not covered hell in this book. Next week's reading is about the image of Christ. Historically, it is out of a wish to use the message of the Gospels to recreate in this world the heavenly kingdom outlined there that the monastic movement was born, aspiring to the values of community, mutual love, and the worship of God, not self. The founders of the monastic orders, such people as Saint Benedict, who had a monastery, whose Benedict's rule was used in a Benedictine monastery where Norwich, the Anglican Cathedral, is now, and where Tim Cawkwell was or could still be a steward there. The founders of the monastic orders, such people as Benedict with the Benedictine, Anselm, Bernard, and Francis of Assisi, sought a way whereby human beings could live the Christian life at its purest. In turning away from the anguished world of the films examined in this book, 2 films about monks celebrate the joy of living on earth reconciled to God in heaven. Both I'm uncomfortable. Both are based on the lives of real people. Both are composed with enormous care, as if the 2 directors were making a particular personal investment in the films. Both are in episodic form, yet intriguingly their stars are poles apart. In France, when the cinema was invented, the Lumiere brothers and Georges, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, Méliès, whether by accident or in fulfilment of some grand historical purpose, one can only speculate, showed how film need not adopt a single mode of representing the world, but could be widely divergent. That Méliès is pronounced with is M E with a line facing left, L-I, and E with a line facing right, and S. So Méliès, something like that. Méliès. My French isn't brilliant. But we continue. Famously, Auguste and Louis Lumière set up their camera and ran the film uninterrupted for the length of a single roll of film. It might be workers leaving their factory, or a train coming into a station, or the demolition of a wall. While they might have pondered carefully what scene to film and when, the finished result involved a minimum of manipulation. The camera is an instrument to record the everyday life of the world. By contrast, Georges Méliès, a magician and illusionist by profession, on seeing a Lumière film and studying the camera as a mechanical device, saw how it could be used to manipulate photographed reality in order to expand his repertoire of illusionist tricks. Thus, in the many films he made in the first decade of the cinema, he liked to show ghosts, figures appearing and disappearing, disembodied heads and limbs, even a Christ walking on water. The theatricality of the cinema was emphasized in his sets and costumes and in the extravagant gestures of his actors. Moving forward 70 years, when Sergei Parajanov made The Colour of Pomegranates, he not only brought to full flower his belief in the value of art and how the world is enriched by the sacred so that its abundance is inconceivable without it, but he also made one of the finest examples of Méliès-style cinema. Born in Soviet Georgia in 1924, Parajanov started his film career with films made in the Ukrainian language. His first notable work was Shadows of Our Forgotten Ancestors, set in a Carpathian village in southern Ukraine. His next film, The Colour of Pomegranates, is about the Armenian minstrel Sayat Nova, who became a court minstrel in Georgia. The Legend of the Suram Fortress is a version of a Georgian myth, and his last film, Ashik Kerub, is full of references to Muslim Azerbaijan. He thus can be seen to have worked right at the edges of Soviet filmmaking, promoting regional nationalism and asserting cultural and religious identity. His choosing to film the life of Sayat Nova in The Colour of Pomegranates can be seen now as a means of mirroring his own art and the tribulations of making it. Like Parajanov Harufian, who adopted the pseudonym Sayat Nova, King of Song, was born in Tbilisi in Georgia. After starting life as a weaver, he composed songs in Armenian, Azeri Turkish and Georgian, reflecting the ethnic diversity of a region made up of petty princedoms and dominated by Turkish and Persian overlords. He became minstrel to King Irakli II of Kakheta, but after his wife's death retired to a monastery in 1770. He was killed in 1795 by Shah Aga Muhammad's troops during the suppression of a Georgian rebellion. Having refused to renounce his faith reputedly with the verse, "I shall not leave the church, I shall not turn from Jesus." While reflecting the pains and difficulties of the human condition, his poems delight in love and his imagery revels in jewels, precious metals, silks and brocades. In tune with Parajanov's homage to Méliès, whether conscious or unconscious, Sayat Nova is a lover of artifice, both in the world around him and in the language with which he expresses it. Since mystery surrounds his departure from the court of King Irakli, dissidence may have been part of his life as well as Parajanov's, as we shall see. While initially puzzling, the film comes into focus on repeated viewings. The film does have a biographical straightforwardness. It starts with Sayat-Nova's childhood and youth and evokes the life of the court. The second half of the film concerns his life in the monastery and ends with him leaving it, meeting the angel of death, and then dying in the monastery itself. Yet the true flavour of the film, and of the way Parajanov has used the poetry as a springboard to depict the life, may be gathered from the visual opulence of the way certain episodes are narrated. Throughout the film, various texts from Sayat-Nova's poetry are quoted. The first of these is, "Three sacred goats exist, to cherish the pen, the written word, and the book." A tableau is then presented of 5 monks stacking books that have been waterlogged in a rainstorm, the presence of water being reinforced by the sound of it running. In the child's presence, a monk places a large stone on a pile of books, which squeezes the water from them. The boy then climbs a ladder with a large volume, and we see him on the roof making his way among dozens of volumes opened and neatly laid out on the roof of the monastery. We see close-ups of some of the pages illustrated with various gospel scenes, including the baptism of Christ, Jesus with his disciples, the Last Supper. Then, in an astonishing image, the camera perched high up gives a bird's eye view of the boy lying flat on his back with the open books all round him on walls and roofs, their bleached pages turning in the breeze. Secondly, Prayers Before the Hunt shows us a tableau of monks, soldiers and dancing women before a monastery. Then a second tableau of men with a lion cub, 2 peacocks and an antlered deer. Next come prancing horsemen, 3 women gorgeously dressed, a man with a peacock in his arms holding its beak in his mouth, and the poet with his musical instrument, all to the sounds of chanting and of horns. Thirdly, when he enters the monastery, Parajanov shows a comic scene of 14 monks eating pomegranates, to prominent sounds of fruit being crunched, while Sayat-Nova stands disdainfully at the margins. The daily life of the monastery is then explored, both liturgical, the monks' feet being washed in church, the Catholicos, who is the Patriarch of Armenia, swinging a censer, and manual, the treading of grapes, a donkey making the grindstone revolve. When it comes to Sayat-Nova's violent death, Parajanov only hints at it while elaborating the fact of it with dreams and angels. We are shown a text. Tears dimmed my eyes. I was delirious. May my enemies know such woe. He crosses himself and then shows us a golden bowl empty because there is no water in the stone stoop. We see a fresco of the Madonna and Child, then a repeat of Sayat-Nova gesturing with his empty bowl, followed by another fresco of rows of naked men. We confront in close-up a Muslim warrior with a fur hat, then cut to him on a horse from which he shoots an arrow. The Madonna fresco appears again, but this time, as if hit by the arrow, the image of her face falls to the ground. Sayat-Nova is shown a third time with his empty bowl. We see the church interior, and then, in a final close-up, Sayat-Nova leaning back. This ends the episode The Poet's Old Age, and there follow the 7th and 8th, meeting the Angel of Death, the poet buries his love, and the poet's death. In this last section, there occurs the most striking of Parajanov's lustrous images paraded through this film. In long shot against a monastery gable, 7 of the monks take off their black cassocks, revealing a white garment underneath. In the next shot, transported to the roof, Sayat-Nova, naked to the waist, poses atop a gable near the front, while 9 monks stand in an orderly array on the aisle roof behind him, as if they had all just flown there. When Sayat-Nova dies, he lies on the floor surrounded by candles, with the camera in the roof looking down on him. White bundles are then dropped onto the floor, which turn out to be headless white cockerels still flapping their wings. Dear, knocking over the candles and causing feathers to float upwards. The final text from his poetry reads, "Whether I live or die, the crowd will be aroused by my song. I may pass on, yet from that day a part of me will remain in the world." The film takes the details of the poet's life, of the court and of the monastery, and shows them as blessed with abundance. Even the Muslim warrior shouting at the Madonna is part of a unity of creation, as though subsumed in its heavenly richness and strangeness. It is also true that Parajanov is a romantic. More important than anything else is the survival of Sayat-Nova's poetry, and hence by extension Parajanov's film, as if to argue that it is people like them that enrich the earth, as Andrei Tarkovsky thought. The poet-stroke-filmmaker encroaches on the role of God. The immortality of the soul is equated with the immortality of art. In canonizing the poet, the filmmaker seems to be doing the same to himself. Despite this solipsism, the film is less a celebration of a single individual than a hymn to a culture and religion, saturated with a sense of the sacred and the beautiful. With its roots in 19th century romanticism, dissidence has been a 20th century condition of which Parajanov's life is as good an example as any, for not only did he decline to be part of the central institutions of Soviet filmmaking, instead creating his films at the margins, not only is his style in opposition to the mainstream mode of telling stories across the world, but he is a true refusenik. I'm not sure what that word is. In 1973, he was arrested in Kiev on various charges, which included those of homosexuality and of illegal trafficking in religious icons, and served 4 years in prison. Once released and back in Georgia, he was harassed and blacklisted. In 1982, another attempt was made to bring charges, which ultimately failed. As a result, the gap between The Colour of Pomegranates and his next film, The Legend of the Suram Fortress, was 15 years. His dissidence was therefore sustained by great courage, for although burning to express himself, he would not compromise his aestheticism for the sake of authority. On the other hand, dissidence need not be solely political. It can take a religious form, as we shall see in the next chapter in discussing Pier Paolo Pasolini. Roberto Rossellini, seemingly an Orthodox Catholic, was equally dissident. Although he spent a whole career of filmmaking parading the virtues of Christianity, at the end of his life he insisted in interviews that he was an atheist. He seems to have distrusted the practice of faith, especially as organised by religious institutions, but was overwhelmed by the immense force of Christianity on the grounds that it pointed the way to freedom of an absolute kind. Rossellini, swimming in the intellectual seas of Marxism in the Italy of the 1940s, deliberately chooses Christianity as his ideology. Although many filmmakers like Rossellini have long careers, and his stretched for 40 years, beginning in the late 1930s, and produced 87 hours of film time, few are so hard to summarise. He began by making short nature films before making free war films in the fascist film industry, all with strong Catholic themes, and one, The Man with the Cross, 1943, set on the Nazi Soviet front and featuring an army priest as its hero who dies in the thick of battle seeking to bring salvation to children and Soviets. After the liberation, he creates a trilogy about the effect of war on ordinary people: Rome, Open City, Paisa, and Germany, Year Zero. Then came his marriage to Ingrid Bergman, and another series of films on how Christian values must be a part of the post-war world: Stromboli, Europa 51, Voyage in Italy. There follows a period between the mid-1950s and the early 1960s when his career seems to drift, although it does include a film made in India in 1958, an indicator of his enlarging consciousness of the world. In 1964, he moves in a radical direction that preoccupies him to his death in 1977. He decides to make films for television in the belief that he could thrive under the disciplines of filming on the cheap, and in the hope that television could be the educational medium that would transform mass audiences throughout the world. For his subject matter, he embarked on making no less than a history of Western civilization, in which Christian values are a key element, not because they set the spiritual above the material, but because they balance the two. The project includes a 6-hour version of the Acts of the Apostles and a film about Augustine of Hippo, which is a didactic and engaging study of a founding father of the Christian Church, but also histories of mankind. The Iron Age, specifically focusing on human use of the metal, and man's struggle for survival, respectively 4 3/4 and 10.5 hours long. The philosopher Socrates, For Reason Like Love is a Civilizing Force, Blaise Pascal, Poised Between Faith and Science, Descartes, and Leon Battista Alberti, the principal figure in the Age of the Medici. The one film of this era to receive widespread distribution is La Prise de Pouvoir par Louis XIV. 14. Louis XIV. A clinical account of Louis XIV coming to the throne in France and imposing absolute monarchy, and indeed an absolute version of civilization as symbolized by Versailles. His most controversial film was Anno Uno, a portrait of Italian politics between 1944 and 1954, focused on the Christian Democrat leader Alcide de Gasperi, who led the country in the post-war years. It managed to upset all shades of Italian political opinion, including the Christian Democrats who had commissioned the film. Sorry about that. Now, where was I? Right. Rossellini's, I think I'm from here. Rossellini's last feature film before he died was The Messiah, his version of the gospel story, which, because it comes right at the end of his career, appears to occupy a position of crowning not just his historical project of the last 15 years of his life, but his whole career as well. Yet this is misleading, for it was just after completing the film that he went on record as being an atheist, adding, what is important in Jesus' message is his faith in man. Rossellini's heart is not in piety, but in humanism, informed by the gospel's message of love as the basis of human community. He strove throughout his life to illustrate the value of communal interdependence. The Italian word is correlata. And it is no surprise to learn that at his death, the contradictions of his life, which he balanced so remarkably, were reflected in his funeral. This was a church affair, attended both by Enrico Berlinguer, head of the Communist Party, and Aldo Moro, one of the leaders of the Christian Democrats. Rossellini's dissidence was evolved as he searched to unify humankind, but its complexity has still to be grasped. His assertion of atheism has to be squared with his vision of heaven, embodied in Francesco Aguilare de Dio, made comparatively early in his career in 1950. This is a portrait in 10 episodes of St. Francis of Assisi, or rather of his community, for Rossellini always liked to see the great figures of history as part of a group of men and women, not as isolated individuals. Released with the English title Francis, God's Jester, it could as easily be called Francis, God's Buffoon. This is partly because he draws not just on the little flowers of St. Francis, but also the life of Brother Ginepro, who expresses his Franciscan humility in a gratingly simple-minded, even absurd way. Both Francis and Ginepro exemplify the philosophy of 1 Corinthians 1 verse 27, which Rossellini cites at the opening. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. Thus it is not just Francis' simplicity that the film seeks to extol, but the very irrationality, even absurdity, to which Christian love can lead. The brothers in the rain shouting for joy, Francis embracing the leper for sheer love, Brother Ginepro's fearlessness in the face of the brute Nicolaio. In the 9th episode, Francis expounds to Brother Leone on what consists perfect joy. It is not in making the blind see, not in raising the dead, not in knowing the language of the angels, not in knowing the secrets of nature, not in converting all people to Christianity. It is only after they have been forcibly ejected from the house at which they have sought alms that Francis, sitting in the mud, concludes that perfect joy consists in following Jesus' gift of self-conquest and suffering in his name. Only in this is perfect joy. Rossellini wishes to suggest this idea is not just comic, but cosmic as well. Because he films the episodes in the open air of the Italian countryside, because he uses Franciscan novices to play the brothers, because he shows Francis talking to the birds, he makes Francis's world actual. He uses film to embody the imagination that the reader brings to the little flowers, but also uses it to connect the realities of Francis's daily life with Franciscan values, speaking down the centuries. To Protestants, never mind atheists, the piety of the marvellous encounter between St. Clare and St. Francis in Santa Maria degli Angeli is cloying, but when Francis seeks out and embraces the beggar disfigured by leprosy, his compassion is more than reverential, but rather a challenge to all individuals of any persuasion. Perfect joy does not include miracles such as making the blind see or raising the dead. What attracts Rossellini to Francis is the way he conquers suffering and his embracing of poverty. Francis and poverty were lovers, according to Dante in Paradiso, chapter 12, part 12, 74. When Brother Maceo asks Francis why the whole world wants to follow him, Francis replies that God could not find among sinners anyone more vile, useless, and sinful than me to employ for the marvellous work that he intends to accomplish. In The Little Flowers, this episode is set simply as Francis was returning from prayer in the wood and is a dialogue between the two monks. Rossellini puts it at the beginning of the film, Maceo asking the question in front of the assembled band of 12 Franciscans, and in a brilliant coup de cinéma, it is raining hard, making the paradox of St. Francis's words visible in the incongruity of expressing the secret of spiritual power on a sodden road. The early Franciscan literature that survives is largely a parade of miracles. Rossellini ignores them all. For example, when in The Little Flowers, Francis and Clare meet, the folk of Assisi Batona and the surrounding countryside saw Santa Maria degli Angeli, the whole friary and the wood around it ablaze with light, as though a great fire were consuming the church. whereas Paradzanov would have ensured we witnessed this act of spontaneous combustion. Rossellini films it naturalistically. The episode concludes with a long shot of monks and nuns sitting in a frozen group. While a voiceover tells us that the people of Assisi saw the church ablaze, visually it does so only in the imagination, turning the words into metaphor. His version of the Messiah simply eschews miracles. Even Jesus' resurrection is a rarefied affair, for he finds the sacred not in the supernatural, but in the everyday. If anything, the miracle is in the way. The great people of history lived and worked among ordinary people. His Francis follows a line of thought expressed most daringly in The Miracle, made 2 years earlier. I think that's the third. Yes. Third version. The third film we're concentrating on. And especially consonant with Pier Paolo Pasolini's belief, which will be explored in the next chapter, in the capacity of pre-industrial peoples for the sacred. This is a 43-minute film made from an idea by Federico Fellini, who collaborated with Rossellini on a number of his scripts at that time, including Francis, and released as a segment of Ways of Love. A peasant woman, Nanny, is in the fields when, seeing a man walk past her, she tells herself that it is St. Joseph. She stops him, and as they rest, she asks him to take her to paradise. A voiceover refers to the revelation in the Gospel by the angel to Joseph. Joseph, son of David, be not afraid to take Mary, for that which is born was conceived. Waking later, she finds Joseph gone and returns to the village. Nanny is almost without possessions and spends her time hovering around the church. To the villagers, she is a mad woman, and when she is discovered to be pregnant, she is humiliated by them and made to walk a Via Dolorosa out of the village. Fleeing it, she makes her way into the hills and struggles towards a hilltop church, following the path of a goat. The main door is locked, but finding a back entrance and going in, she gives birth to her child. At the end, saying, "My child, my creature, my blood, all mine," she feeds the child at her breast. The creative tension in the film is between the simple facts of the story. A woman gets pregnant for a passerby, is mocked by the village, and gives birth secretly, and its gospel quality. Nani's conception is of an immaculate kind. She is shut out by society and church. The birth is a version of the Nativity. Rossellini is intrigued by the conjunction of poverty and sacredness. Unusually for someone so concerned in his other films to express communal interdependence, he isolates Nani from her social surroundings in a violent way and hints at the failure of the church as an institution to give her shelter. It can only be by the back door. For Rossellini's religious atheism reveals a complex mix of ingrained Catholicism and intellectual rebelliousness. In his way, he is the paradigm of a Christianity that urges society to strip away the institutions of the church and rediscover the essence of Jesus' message. To sum up, the serenity of heaven is achieved by attaining a new vision of the world. Plato recounts a story in the Republic of prisoners being led from the cave where they have spent their lives into the sunlight so that they see the world face to face instead of as shadows on the wall. The same set of data can be interpreted differently. In Francis, God's jester, even in the miracle, there is a peace to be attained in following the spirit of the gospel. And our final reading next week, God willing, we'll be looking at the image of Christ, where it opens with G.M. Hopkins's sonnet, beginning as kingfishers catch fire. Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs, lovely in eyes, not his. And the films we'll look at, there's 7 of them, and some of them are quite familiar. The Messiah, King of Kings, The Greatest Story Ever Told, The Gospel According to St. Matthew, my personal favourite Ben-Hur, Barabbas, and Akaton. And, of course, we'll finish with the epilogue, which is only a few pages. It's only a few pages long, and that will, God willing, next week end this series on Sundays. I'm not sure what I'll be doing on the 22nd and 29th of March. The 6th of March I will be doing 6th of April, I will be concluding my other series, which is a daily readings from To Seek and to Save. That will be the final reading on that week. So if I do start a new series on the 22nd, it will continue on the 29th, but then it will start back again on the 13th of the following month. So that's my plan. I'm not sure what will happen on the 22nd. I hear it's Passion Sunday, the 22nd, and Palm Sunday, the 29th, followed by Resurrection Sunday, Easter Sunday, on the 6th. So I'm not sure what will happen, but we shall see. But until then, as always, may God bless you all. Amen.